be in front of it. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, no, I think we're good. I hope so. I have reading guides to hand out to you guys. Maybe you guys at this table could just help me by distributing. So Alexander, you don't get one. That sounds mean, doesn't it? But I think I've got, did I tell your mom that I had for you guys? I think so. Let's see, everybody take one except Alexander and make sure everybody's got one. Are we good? No, that's not. Yeah, he gets one. Are we good? Everybody's got a reading guide. Excellent. And yeah, you can just print it off a little bit at a time because it's a lot to print off at once. I want to do a few things differently this year. And the first thing is, especially on the first day of school, we tend to be very busy because there's a lot to me. I need to explain things to you, and I need to show you the reading guides, and there's all this stuff to do. And some of you have been with me for years, many years. Some of you have been with me a couple of years. Some of you are, coming back to me here from another day. So most of you know, except for Noah, how things work. You're familiar with me. But there's just always a lot to talk about. And I am guilty of just, I have to tell them all this stuff, because I only have them for an hour and a half. And I want to take a moment to do a couple of things differently. The first is to remember that when we learn anything, we learn because God helps us learn. To recognize God's agency, in our learning. And I study a lot. I like to read. I really like to learn things. I just really dig it. But I just dive into the thing, And lately I've been trying to think, I need to ask God to help me understand before we read the Bible, but before we read anything. Because if something is true, it's true because God shows us, right? It's true because God is true. So in your reading guide for this year, I want you to turn to the very back. Do you have one? Oh, yes, okay. And I am sorry, your reading guide has a lot of pages this year. And so I bought these notebooks, and it's a real tight fit. So the pages don't move very easily. So here's what you can do. You can take some of them out for a while if you want to. You can stick them in one of the pockets. You can put them away at home or something like that. It will make it turn easily. I'm sorry about that. Technically, it says this size notebook is for X number of pages, way more pages than I have. But they lied. They're not good for that many pages. What I want to do every week when we meet is take a moment and look at the prayers in the back of the book. And I urge you to use these at home. It doesn't have to be these words. Use your own words. It's fine. These are good words, though. And, ask God to help you do a good job when you learn. Because I've started asking him to help me do a good job when I learn. So I'm going to read this. And you can read it out loud with me. You can just read along and listen. And I'm going to try to remember why we're here. It's because we want God to show us truth, right? We want to learn things that are true. Christ, my Lord, the giver of light and wisdom, who opened the eyes of the blind man and transformed the fishermen into wise heralds and teachers of the gospel through the coming of the Holy Spirit, shine also in my mind the light of the grace of the Holy Spirit. Grant me discernment, understanding, and wisdom in learning. Enable me to complete my assignments and to abound in every good work. For to you I give honor and glory. Amen. And then there's a separate prayer for study. That's the prayer of a student. This is prayer for study. Most blessed Lord, send the grace of your Holy Spirit on me to strengthen me, that I may learn well the subject I am about to study, and by it become a better person for your glory, the comfort of my family, and the benefit of your church and our nation. Amen. That's a big demand, isn't it? That we are not learning just for ourselves. It's to become a better person. Why? For his glory. But the comfort of my family. and the benefit of your church and our nation. That's a tall order, but that's what we're doing here together. So I hope we can remember that. You know, I'm going to get all busy, and I'm going to have a million things I want to say, and I'm going to forget. So you guys are going to help hold me accountable, right? Mrs. Ferguson, what about the prayers? So if I forget, maybe you can help me remember that I want to start that way. And in previous years, I often start with, here's your guides, and I'm going to show you everything, and this is everything we're going to do this year. We're going to do it a little different. We're just going to listen to some beautiful, beautiful writing, beautiful poems. Some of you know, everybody but Noah, I think. You're going to get that a lot. Everybody but Noah. In previous years, I've brought in Art of the Week, right? And we've had some beautiful work of art to look at and think about. But of course, when we get into the modern time, there's a bajillion works of art that we could look at. So we're going to look at the poem. We're going to have a poem of the week. And the poems are all actually in your guide. Sometimes there's more than one poem. But I just want to stop for a little while and talk about poems. Which of you would you say, I like poems? Who is that true for? I like poetry. What makes a poem a poem? Why do we call something a poem and not just a novel or a essay or something of that nature? What makes it a, what do you think, Dominic? The way, can you elaborate? What kind of way? So it's more eloquent. It's got a beauty of language that maybe we don't always use in our everyday speech. This is common in poems, definitely. Is there anything else that, maybe not always, but is often characteristic of a poem? Yeah, what do you think?
It usually has meters and rhymes.
Yeah, it often has a meter, a rhythm, and it frequently rhymes. Does it have to rhyme?
No.
It does not have to rhyme. Okay. In Mrs. Ferguson's opinion, all really good poetry has some sort of meter to it. It has a beauty of rhythm. I don't dig poetry that's just a bunch of words on the page that somebody kind of spit their feelings out, sort of. But that may be because I'm not well educated in modern poetry. Maybe I don't know how to appreciate it. So I have to take that into account. I like the rhythm. And we're all familiar with that, aren't we? Presumably we all read Dr. Seuss, you know. And so I've done this a million times for you, some of you, you know, like the Cat in the Hat. The sun did not shine, it was too wet to play, so we sat in the house all that cold, cold, wet day. I sat there with Sally, we sat there with two, and I said, how I wish we had something to do. Da 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 da. It's Dr. Seuss. It has a name, but it's the rhythm we associate with Dr. Seuss, right? So often poetry has a meter. Okay, now I have a question. Are poems easy to understand?
They can be. They can.
Okay.
They can be, and then there's some that are not. Like for example, Beowulf, like it wasn't quite as easy to understand that one, but there are some poems that just kind of come easy to read.
Okay. So do we agree? We'll take a vote here. Do poems have to be difficult to understand? No. Is it difficult to understand the Cat in the Hat? Not particularly. One fish, two fish, red. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, does it? But green eggs and ham, not so hard. But would you say that maybe you have encountered many poems that do seem difficult to understand? If you've encountered many poems at all? I think sometimes we're just not quite sure what's the point? What are they saying? And what I wanted to do today is I wanted to read several poems to you that are not difficult to understand at all. And so I felt like coming in here, I might hear you all say, oh, poems are terrible. I can't understand any of them. And I'm glad that seems to be the case. But I wanted to prove to you that good poetry can be simple and very straightforward. But there's one thing that we're leaving out, I think, that maybe poems tend to do. And I think there's another group of writings, parables, do this too. What do parables, because we're familiar with parables, Jesus' parables, stories, right? What do the parables do for us? Yeah, tell me. They tell us a lesson. And do they tell us in a way, I mean, why use a parable at all? Why tell a story?
Give it context, give it like an example of how it would actually happen.
Is it easier to remember a story, or is it easier to remember just instructions?
It's easier to remember a story.
It really is, isn't it? So if Jesus had said, yeah, preachers of the gospel spread the word, and sometimes people are too taken up with the cares of life, and they don't listen. And he didn't say that at all. He said, one day a sower went out to sow some seed. And it fell here, and it fell here, and it fell here. You know, and it's really easy to remember. And poems can do that too, right? They sort of part the veil a little bit, and they show us something maybe we wouldn't have thought of before, and we probably wouldn't remember if somebody just said it. I'm going to give you a couple of examples, okay? So I brought with me, right, I need to really remember to do this. I brought this lovely children's book. I hope that some of you had the great joy of reading from this book when you were younger. It is A Child's Garden of Verses by Robert Louis Stevenson. Does anybody know what Robert Louis Stevenson, what is the famous thing he wrote? Oh, it's breaking my heart. Your assignment is to go home and read this book. You should, though. Treasure Island. Everything piratey, you know, yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum and all that stuff, it's all from Treasure Island. It all came out of the mind of Robert Louis Stevenson. Because, I mean, I want real pirates to do that, but I'm not sure they do.
No.
Sing yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum. Robert Louis Stevenson wrote Treasure Island, several other very exciting, they call them like kids' books, but I think they're amazing for grown-ups. But he wrote a bunch of poems. And they're very simple. But they're very profound sometimes. Now, it might mean something to me, because I'm like way, way older than you. But I want to read a couple of them that I particularly love and talk about what's happening in the poem. It's really easy. And what might be in the mind of the man who wrote it, who's not a child anymore. I'm going to add this one thing. Of all the people in the world, this guy remembered what it was to be a kid. You know, maybe you've even started to forget what it feels like to be little. A lot of grown-ups seem to forget what it feels like to be little. They don't feel the feeling anymore. You really felt the feeling. Okay, here's the first one I love. It is called Block City. Seems pretty easy. What are you able to build with your blocks? Castles and palaces, temples and docks. Rain may keep raining and others go roam, but I can be happy in building at home. Let the sofa be mountains, the carpet the sea. There I'll establish a city for me, a kirk and a mill and a palace beside, and a harbor as well, where my vessels may ride. Great is the palace with pillar and wall, a sort of a tower on the top of it all, and steps coming down in an orderly way to where my toy vessels lie safe in the bay. And this one is sailing and that one is moored. Hark to the song of the sailors on board. And see, on the steps of my palace, the kings coming and going with presents and things. Now I have done with it. Down let it go. All in a moment the town is laid low. Block upon block lying scattered and free. What is there left of my town by the sea? Yet, as I saw it, I see it again. The kirk and the palace, the ships and the men. And as long as I live, and where'er I may be, always remember my town by the sea. What happens in that poem?
He builds like a giant city using blocks, and then he wipes it out.
And we've all, haven't we done it? If we have younger siblings, don't they do it? It's like, look at my tower, boom. It took you an hour. Don't care, boom. Because it's fun. I mean, that's the only reason you built it, right? Is for the boom moment.
That's kind of what happened when I was really little building Legos, but instead of someone smacking you down, they would drop it downstairs.
Oh, that's very mean. Don't do that to other people's towers. But he did it to his own tower. It's a very simple poem. Little kids build elaborate things out of blocks, and only they can see it, right? I mean, like, oh, see, here are the sailors. See, they're going back on the steps. No, they're not. It's all in your imagination. Then, boom. And so, oh, what a cute little poem. But then, yet as I saw it, I see it again. The kirk and the palace, the ships and the men. And as long as I live, and wherever I may be, I'll always remember my town by the sea. Now, who's speaking there? Is it the kid? Maybe. Oh, that was awesome. That's an awesome palace. I think I'll always remember that. How about a 30-year-old? How about a 40-year-old? How about a 50-year-old? How about a 58-year-old? Because I have one too. It wasn't a palace, it was something else. I have an imaginary thing I built. And as long as I live and wherever I may be, I'll always remember. You know, and so it's like, oh, you know, and if he said, well, you see, children like to build things, you know, and they have great imaginations. And then they destroy them. But sometimes when you're older, you still remember. That's boring. But this is beautiful. Do you see what I mean? Poems can kind of sweep you up into a feeling, and maybe you don't have the feeling. It's fine. Does every poem give everybody the feeling? No. So we have a difference, right? Sometimes when we read literature, we have to make a difference. Things I like and things that are good, right? And they're not always the same. Unfortunately, things I like sometimes are not good at all. Sometimes I have bad taste in various things, right? But sometimes it's okay to look at a piece of art and say, that's an excellent piece of art. It doesn't move me. It doesn't make me feel the feeling. But it's excellent, right? Sometimes we do have to admit it makes me feel the feeling, but it's not excellent. That does both for me. It's a beautiful poem. It's so simple. But because I have a place in mind whenever I read it, it makes my heart break a little bit because I'm not a little kid anymore. But I remember, you know? Okay, here's another one that I love. I promise, only 2 out of this. And then we'll move on to something that maybe the guys will like better, particularly. Okay, this one's called From a Railway Carriage, from a train. Now, you have to remember in Robert Louis Stevenson's time, there weren't cars. So he's going to describe an experience that we have all the time. You had it coming here, and that's going fast in a vehicle. And things go fast past your window, you know. In his time, only a train could do that for you. Oh, very appropriate. But you guys know this, what he's going to describe, because it happens every time you get in a car and go anywhere. Here we go. Faster than fairies, faster than witches, bridges and houses, hedges and ditches, and charging along like troops in a battle, all through the meadows, the horses and cattle. All of the sights of the hill and the plain fly as thick as driving rain, and ever again in the wink of an eye, painted stations whistle by. Here is a child who clambers and scrambles all by himself in gathering brambles. Here's a tramp who stands and gazes, and there is the green for stringing the daisies. Here's a cart run away in the road, lumping along with man and load. And here's a mill, and there's a river. Each a glimpse, and gone forever. What happens in the poem? I mean, I already told you before I read it.
He's like riding past the station in a town.
Yeah, he's right. And we've done it, right? We do it every time we get in the car. You know, you ever have somebody in your car says, look at the, I don't, look at the cow. And by the time you can figure out where to look, it's gone. You know, and I never look at where the person is pointing. My husband mocks me. He's like, look at the cow. I'm like, where? There. That's the finger is for. It's gone. Each a glimpse and gone forever. Now, here's my question for you guys. To the kid reading the poem, yeah, it's awesome. Boom, boom, boom. I love seeing the stuff fly by. Can you imagine, though, what I might be thinking of when I hit the line, each a glimpse and gone forever? What else flies by?
Time.
And I can't get it back. The cow's not coming back, right? Not that cow. Not that tramp, you know, not that cart run away with the load. Each a glimpse and gone forever. See? So Robert Louis Stevenson does something amazing with poems that you can read to little kids. And they're like, oh yeah, that's fun. But then the grown-up reads it, and it's like, oh. Each a glimpse and gone forever. It's a lot of gones when you get a certain number of years under your belt. So, awesome. So, difficult? No. Maybe deeper than you think? Yeah. I have one more completely different poem I want to read for you. And you might know this poem. Are you familiar, first of all, are you familiar with World War I? Yes. Much of the fighting in World War I happened in the north of Europe in a place we refer to as Flanders. Right? Today it's part of Belgium. And Flanders Fields was sort of the western front of World War I. And they estimate, and this is my prologue to this poem, they estimate that 1 million people died in Flanders in World War I. 1 million. That's a lot of people. Okay. So the freaky thing about Flanders, these particular fields, is they had some poppies growing there. Poppies are big red flowers that are kind of cup-shaped, and they have a dark center. And when the fighting kept going for a while, poppies and more poppies and more poppies started springing up on the battlefield because there were already seeds kind of latent in the soil from the poppies that had been there. But the artillery had lime in it, and it fertilized the soil. And here's the other thing. 1 million dead bodies with their horses is a lot of fertilizer. And as the bodies started rotting and they started burying people there, more and more poppies. And it's kind of bizarre because flowers are pretty, and war is not pretty, right? But they happen in the same place. So there's a man, and he was in World War I, and he wrote this poem I'm going to read to you the day after he saw his friend get blown up into several pieces. And he wrote this. And my question for you is going to be, what is this poem about? I want to know who's talking and what the point is. It's not going to be a hard question, I promise. In Flanders fields, the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place. And in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you, from failing hands, we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with those with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. Who is talking? Did you catch who is talking? The dead. We are the dead. And what do they want? Don't forget us. Keep fighting. It's a really easy poem. But oh my goodness, it cuts to your heart. You picture the red flowers and then this poor guy who saw his friend just obliterated among the poppies. And you know what? The year after he wrote that, he happened to him. He blew up too. And so poetry, I don't know what I want to say. Like it stirs your feelings in a way that just saying, 1 million people died at Flanders and there are flowers growing on the field. It's just a bunch of facts. But then I hear that and I think, oh my goodness, it's not just a bunch of facts. So this year, is somebody going to say something? Was it Alexandra or Charlotte?
I was going to say something.
Okay, yes.
I raised my hand. Actually, the poppy became a symbol later on for the people who died in World War I.
It did, because of that.
Yeah, I went to the War Memorial in Kansas City.
Oh.
World War I Memorial, so I got to check out all that.
Cool. Yes. It became from that poem. He wrote that poem and it was published in sort of a Saturday, Sunday newspaper circular sort of thing, and it became very, very popular. Popular. So we are going to spend some time together this year looking at poems. And I have given you in your reading guide every week at least one poem. And I've organized them so that we start from sort of the beginnings of our time period up until modern times. And we can kind of see how poetry changes. And we are starting with Shakespeare. And so if you would turn with me in your reading guide to week 1, page 1. And we have 3 sonnets. Now, is every poem really easy to understand? No. Are poems written 400 years ago always easy to understand? Well, unfortunately not, because we don't use the same sorts of words in the same way sometimes. But here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to read each of these 3 sonnets. You know what? Next week, we're going to talk about what makes it a sonnet. We're not going to worry about that today. Maybe you already know, but we're not going to, we'll visit that later. And here's your job. Just tell me what it's about. See if you can tell me what it's about. And then if we are not sure, we're going to look to see how to find clues to see what it might be about. Okay, Sonnet 73. All Shakespeare sonnets just have numbers, by the way. And when we identify them by number, or sometimes we just say the first line. Which sonnet is it? It's the blah, 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 and you say the first line. Let's start with 73. Here we go. And remember, your job is, what's he talking about? Just in broad, not every detail, like in broad strokes, what do you think is happening in this poem? Okay? That time of year thou mayest in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none, or few, do hang upon these boughs which shake against the cold, bare ruined choirs where late the sweet bird sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self that seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. Right. Even if you don't understand everything, do you have a sense of what's happening in this poem? Dominic, what do you think? What's going on? It's a farewell. We get that from the last line, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. It's got kind of a sadness about it, doesn't it? It sounds sad. Why do you think somebody's going to need to leave soon? What's happening? They're dying. What makes you think someone is dying? Okay. However, we're going to look back, and who lays on its ashes? The glowing of such fire that on the ashes of his youth doth lie. It's like a fire. But yeah, it's like a fire dying out, right? So let's look at those first 4 lines. The poet says, I am like a something. You tell me. That time of year thou mayest in me behold, when yellow leaves, or few, or none, do hang upon these boughs. What am I like?
Like a tree.
And what kind of tree?
Like a tree getting ready for winter.
I'm like an autumn tree. My leaves are yellow. Where yellow leaves, or few or none, do hang upon these boughs. I don't know why I have to act out being a tree for you, but I do. I am like a tree in autumn, says the poet. Then, in me, thou seest the twilight of such day as after sunset fadeth in the west. I am like, in me thou seest the twilight of such day as after sunset fadeth in the west. When is that? When do we see the twilight?
When the sun's setting.
I am like a sunset. I'm like an autumn tree. I am like a sunset. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, the fire's youth. As on the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. Now, you got to remember, I know y'all have sat by a campfire sometime, right? And you put the logs on, it blazes up, but you sit there for a while and you eat a million s'mores. And it dies down, doesn't it? And you know that moment when it's not out, but it's not got flames? What's it look like? Picture it in your head. What do you see in that fire? It's not gone, but it's not flaming anymore. What's it doing?
It's dying.
It's dying. Tell me what it looks like. What do you see when you look at that fire, but it's almost out, but it's not out? What's it look like?
It's like glowing.
It's like glowing, little embers glowing, right? It's on its deathbed. It's not dead. He says, I'm like a tree in autumn. I'm like the sunset. I'm like a fire that's fading out. Now, is he dying? Yes. But maybe more properly, what do we call the process that's happening to him? I'm like an autumn tree. It's not winter yet, but winter is coming.
He's getting old.
I'm getting old. I mean, that's really all this poem says. I'm getting old, and so you love me more because eventually I'm going to die. Oh, but it's so much prettier than saying, I'm getting old, so you better love me now while you still got me. But that's what it means, right? And we catch the clues when we think about what he's describing. But Dominic got it right off, right? Somebody's leaving, and apparently somebody's going to die. Yeah. But he says it so much more beautifully than we could ever say it. Does that make sense? Does it seem easy enough? It's like, well, it's easy after you explain it. But there's clues in there. It's not normal talk, modern talk, right? But there's enough clues there that if we really look at it, because if you just take the whole thing and you don't focus on it, if it's hard. But if you say, that time of year thou mayest in me behold, when yellow leaves or none or few do hang upon those boughs. Okay, that's enough to tell you autumn. Like what has leaves? What has boughs? Trees. When are they gone or yellow? Autumn. I'm like autumn. Okay, let's try 55. Your job is tell me what he's saying, but not as a poem. Tell me just in normal words. Okay. Not marble, nor the gilded monuments of princes shall outlive this powerful rhyme. But you shall shine more bright in these contents than unswept stone, besmeared with sluttish time. When wasteful war shall statues overturn, and broils root out the work of masonry, nor Mars his sword, nor war's quick fire shall burn the living record of your memory. 'Gainst death, and all oblivious enmity shall you pace forth. Your praise shall still find room, even in the eyes of all posterity that wear this world out to the ending doom. So, till the judgment that yourself arise, you live in this and dwell in lover's eyes.
It's about like him having like in love with somebody, I'm assuming.
He's in love with someone, and what will they last longer than?
Like everything.
Statues, monuments, marble, stone buildings. How will they live longer than those? Where will they live longer than those?
The words of the poem.
In these contents. And at the end it says, you live in this. We could sum it up in one sentence, right? I'm writing a poem about you, and it's going to make you darn near immortal. And you know what? It's 400 years later, and we're reading it today, talking about this person. So, just saying. How long will this person live? How long will this poem live? Till when? The next to last line.
Till the judgment that yourself arrives.
What does that mean?
So like, maybe,
When is the judgment that yourself arise?
like,
Into time, Judgment Day, the resurrection. Oh my goodness, that's quite a claim. You know what? Marble and gilded monuments, they will not outlive this powerful rhyme. That's how he starts. And he says, war can overturn statues. Death wipes people out. But you will pace forth, because I wrote a poem about you. But that would be so lame to just say that in words. You're special because I love you, and everyone will always remember. Of course, if you didn't write the poem, they wouldn't remember, right? All right. One more. Let's see. We have 50 minutes. One more. This is my favorite Shakespeare song. And I am going to try to do it without looking, because this is one that I know. But I might miss a word. You'll be gracious to me, I'm sure. All right. Your job is what's going on in this poem, right? That's all you're looking for. When in disgrace with fortune in men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Yet in these thoughts, myself almost despising, haply I think on thee. And then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. What did he say? What's the point? How does he feel at the beginning of the poem?
not good to say
Not
that.
good. Life really stinks. What are some of the things going wrong in this guy's life? Everybody else is more talented than me. I'm desiring this man's scope, art and that man's scope. I want his talent. I want his brains. What about when in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes? What would we say? How would we today say, I am in disgrace with fortune?
Jealous of other people's goods.
Yeah, definitely jealous. But if I'm in disgrace with fortune, it could mean something additionally. We don't call it fortune. We call it luck. And what do we say when bad things are happening to us? I'm having bad luck. I'm in disgrace with fortune. You're definitely right. He is looking at other people. And he adds on to it. So I'm in disgrace with fortune. I'm also in disgrace with men's eyes. What do you think it means to be in disgrace with fortune in men's eyes? Not only do I envy them, but how do they feel about me? I'm in disgrace in their eyes. like you. Life stinks. I only have bad luck. And everybody hates me. Not to mention that everybody is more attractive and more talented than I am. Now, at this point, I am so on board with the poet because I suspect we've all felt like that sometime. You guys aren't very old, but I suspect at some point already you've thought, why is everything against me? Why isn't my life good like so-and-so's life? What turns his feelings around in this poem? What changes him? Well, that still makes him feel crummy, doesn't it? When he dwells on those. But something happens that makes him not feel so bad about himself anymore. He's thinking about the person that he loves. Haply, and by the way, this is one of those words don't mean the same thing. It doesn't mean happily. It means by chance. Hap. Hap means chance. It just so happens that I think about you. Haply, I think on you. By the way, do you know what? That's why we get happiness. That's why they always distinguish joy, which is deep and long-lasting, to happiness. Happiness depends on hap. Just chance, you know? It's like I ate a good meal, or the sun is shining today, and, you know, somebody gave me money. I don't know, I found $5 on the ground. I'm happy. It was just chance. It was hap. Haply, I think on thee. For thy sweet wealth remembered thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. When he thinks about this person, would he trade places with any of those other people? All those people he envied, does he want to trade places with them now? I wouldn't trade places with kings when I think about you. I love this. Okay. I was going to say, here's the bad news. That's a terrible way to introduce what I'm about to say. I want everybody in this class to memorize a poem this year. It is one of your assignments. And I want you to recite it. Now, some people get really kind of uptight about being in front of people, and I get that. So I would love for you to come do it for all of us. You can do it just for me. You know, like if you want to stay after, but you could do it for your parents. You could do it for your mom or something if you just want to be at home. Do you know what I mean? I'm not here to make people upset or embarrassed. I'm here to get you to put a poem in your head, right? However I get you to do that. Your reading guide, sometime this year, you've got 9 months. Your reading guide has some amazing poems in it. Some of them are funny. Some of them are dead serious. Some of them are a little odd. And you could browse through, and if something strikes your fancy, or as we're moving through the next couple of months, and we read a poem, and you think, wow, I loved that. I would really like that to be in my brain forever, so I can carry it around with me. Then pick that one. If you don't like any of them, or you already have one in mind, I'd like you to check with me, all right? Somebody yesterday, they were joking. It's like, how about 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish? That one's not okay. But Dr. Seuss may be okay. And some of you have been treated to my very long 2 Dr. Seuss poems that I happen to have memorized. Or you've been treated to them or had them inflicted on you, whichever way you want to say that. So I'm not saying run home and start memorizing a poem this week, but I'm just throwing it out there. And so there's a bunch of poems in this book. There's a bunch of poems on the internet. And I bet all of you have a collection of poetry of some sort in your homes because you're homeschooled. And everybody has some poems somewhere. It can be an old poem, it can be a new poem. Okay? But I'd like you to check with me because just like a haiku, I don't think that's really going to cut it. It ought to be longer than that. But it doesn't have to be Paul Revere's Ride, which several of my kids memorized. It's very long, and you can do it. So I am sending out an email to your parents, and they're being informed that is one of your assignments this year. and I'm going to keep track of who has done their poem, all right? You all look just not very happy with me yet.
No, I'm just
Like, oh,
no,
why did we come to this class?
No,
Mrs. Ferguson is so mean.
no, it's fine.
I didn't mean it that
trying
way.
to think of-
No, you don't have to come up, and if you just don't know, you don't know enough poems to pick something, but you can say, I'd like to do something, I'd like it to be funny and not very long. Great, I'll set you up with a funny and not very long. Or I'd like it to be funny and long. Great, I'll set you up with that. Or I'd like a love poem, or I'd like a nature poem. Or, if you have an interest, I don't know that there's a poem about every interest you could possibly have. There probably is. I don't know them all, but I'm sure I could help you find it, right? Anyway, that is going to happen this year. Another thing that is going to happen this year is I already emailed your parents, and I asked everybody to get some sort of little notebook. It doesn't have to be fancy. I told everybody Office Max had 50-cent composition books in a sale thing. I don't even care if you rip paper out of a notebook and fold it and staple the edge. You know how little kids make their little books? I don't care. But I want everybody to have one. And this is going to become your commonplace book. What is a commonplace book? It is a place where people of the past collected cool quotes from stuff they read. It's a collection of stuff you read that just really, really you thought was exciting or beautiful or whatever. This is mine. Mine's a little cute leather one. It doesn't have to be cute or leather. And I have just written down random stuff. Some of it's just one line, some of it's several pages of stuff I've read that's awesome and cool. And then occasionally I go back through and I remind myself of how cool it was. I even spelled cocoa on the first page. It's okay, it's not perfect. And every week, I would like you to make an entry in your commonplace book. I want you to date it so that I can check it, or your mom can check it, and make sure you're doing it. It doesn't have to be a whole page, guys. It doesn't have to be out of something you're reading for me. Presumably, you read other things besides what you read for me. It could be one of these poems. It could be a couple of lines out of one of the poems, all right? But guys, I'm telling you, if I had had, some of you have been with me several years, if I'd made you do this several years ago, you would have a treasure trove, of quotes from the Iliad and the Odyssey and all this cool stuff and the Divine Comedy and whatnot. But it's never too late to start something. So once a week, we're talking about 5 minutes or less. But as you read, when you notice something awesome, and you say, that seems important for me to remember, jot it down, because eventually you won't remember it. Does that seem clear, what I'm asking you to do?
Yeah.
And I'm just going to have your parents check their commonplace books, make sure they're right, because that's part of the class. That's going to be one of your assignments. It's a very short assignment. Out of anything you read, or music lyrics. Okay. On happy news, I have a wonderful bookmark for each of you. It has got some of the authors that we are reading this year. Okay, hopefully I have the right number. Can you pass this back to Elizabeth behind you? And if you get shorted a bookmark, I will make it good later. Some of those we're going to read. We're going to read Descartes. We're going to read Jane Austen. Did everybody get one? Are you stealing from other people, Dominic? Oh, do we have an extra?
I still have mine from last year.
Oh, but this has got new people. You gotta have the new one. Oh, I can't use the medieval one for the modern world.
Come on, it's the updated
Right.
one.
I'm so glad you still have the one from last year, by the way. Okay, what I would like to do for our last half hour, 35 minutes here, is talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about this year, and also the first book you're going to read. This is called, and it says on the front of your book, Rise of the Modern World. Many of you were with me last year, and we were reading things like the Divine Comedy. We were reading things that took for granted that there is a God, and he made things, and he made you, and he has the right to expect something of you because he made you, and he's in charge. Generally, people believe that. And, I'm not saying I know the personal heart of every single person that lived, right? But in general, society believed those things. Would you say that most people we live with today believe those things? No, they don't, do they? And you might know this to a greater or lesser extent, depending on how exposed you are to media, Dominic, lay it on us. Yeah, like a vending machine, sort of. And so how did we get from one place to the other place? This is the question, right? If there was a time in the history of Europe when almost everybody would agree that there is a God and he is a creator and he has a right and a claim on you, to the place where most of the people we live among either don't believe there is a God. If they do, he's Dominic's vending machine sort of God. And he certainly doesn't have a right to expect anything of me. We somehow got from one to the other. But the question this year is how? And there's a couple of key things that happened over the last 400 or 500 years that slowly led us here. You don't go to sleep. We talked about this when we did Rome. People didn't go to sleep one night and wake up and find out the Roman Empire had fallen. It doesn't work that way. They did wake up and find out the Gauls had sacked Rome in 410. But in general, what we call the fall, it didn't just happen. It takes a long time for things to change. And sometimes you have people like the thinkers, the important people, and they get these crazy ideas, but it takes a while to filter down, right, till the common person thinks that. So it takes some time. And we've had several centuries of working this out. So Shakespeare, whose poems we just read, he's assuming that there is a judgment day, right? So you yourself arise. He's assuming in his plays, and you guys have read, many of you have read some of his plays with me, he's assuming certain things about God and about the world that they don't assume today. And two key figures that I'd like to talk about really changed things up. And one of them was René Descartes. And we're not going to talk about him today because you're going to read, in 3 weeks, you're going to read his Discourse on Method, which blew up philosophy. I mean it. Blew it up. But before him, there was another guy. And he's the guy that makes us chuckle a little bit because his name is Bacon. All right? Always the Bacon. See, Dominic, thank you. I know, I've got to get somebody to smile. Francis Bacon. Roger Bacon was several hundred years before Francis Bacon and would have agreed with him. But Francis is the Bacon we want to discuss today. And Francis Bacon lived during the time of Shakespeare. He lived in England at the same time as Shakespeare under Queen Elizabeth. And he was a government civil servant, and then he got in trouble for bribery or something, and he got sacked. Anyway, so he went on to write all sorts of books. And he went on a little tirade about science. And I want to read just a few things. I'm not going to read the whole thing, just this parts I highlighted. Some things that Francis Bacon had to say about the state of science in, say, the year 1600. Okay? He says, for out of 25 centuries, over which the memory and learning of men extends, you can hardly pick out 6 that were fertile in sciences or favorable to their development. Okay, 25 centuries. How long is that?
That would be out of 20 centuries. Wait, 2 centuries?
5 and 20. 25 centuries is how many years?
25 centuries would be 2,500.
2,500 years. Francis Bacon said, out of 2,500 years of human history, scarcely 6 were any good for science. What's 2,500 minus 600? 1,900 years were a waste, according to Francis Bacon. Just a waste. Oh my goodness. Well, that's kind of a rude thing to say. And then he says, the first cause of so meager a progress in the sciences is referred to the narrow limits of time that has been favorable. We've only had really 600 good years, he says. The second place, there presents itself that during those very ages in which the wits and learning of men have flourished most, or indeed flourished at all, the least part of their diligence was given to natural philosophy. Now you have to understand, natural philosophy means like hard science, what we would call science today. They called it natural philosophy. So botany and biology and chemistry, the natural philosophy, okay? He says, you know, even over those 600 years, people didn't pay attention to the sciences. Well, what were they paying attention to? He said, after the Christian religion was received and grew strong, by far the greater number of the best wits applied themselves to theology. What's theology? What are we studying if we study theology?
Like the Christian religion.
Yeah, God. Do you get it, guys? He's complaining. You know, they wasted all their time thinking about God.
That's not time wasted.
And he says among the Romans, they concentrated on moral philosophy, ethics, doing the right thing. He's like, we don't care about that. He said the Greeks looked at morals and politics. We don't care about that. So he says, how can we amend this? We stink at science. And he calls it the mother of all the sciences. The mother of all knowledge is what he'd mean. The things that we refer to as science today, he says that's the most important thing. It's the mother of all knowledge. What do we need to do about it? He says, an astonishing thing it is to one who rightly considers the matter that no mortal should have seriously applied himself to the opening and laying out of a road for human understanding direct from sense, by a course of experiment orderly conducted and well built up. Okay, what are your senses?
Well, your time senses, and then just, it can refer to other things as well, but.
Yes. In this case, I really think he means from the sense. Let me read it again. Building up understanding direct from sense through a course of experiment, orderly and well brought up. What is he describing? What do we call that today? Using your senses to perceive things in a well-ordered, experimental way.
Doing like an experiment.
Yeah.
Like
The scientific method. He says, I am astonished that people haven't spent their time just observing and testing and weighing and measuring. That's why we're all idiots, says Francis Bacon. He didn't say we're all idiots. He said, that's why we know nothing about the world. He thinks we know nothing about the world. What did they waste their time on? He says they looked to argument, chance, authority. They didn't look at what their senses tell them. But the true method of experience, on the contrary, first lights a candle, and then by means of the candle shows the way, commencing as it does with experience, duly ordered and digested. He used a little poetry there, didn't he? Experiments are like lighting a candle. And when you find one truth by experiment, it shows the truth of everything else. Francis Bacon felt so strongly about this that I got to tell you what he named his book. So, but to know it, you have to know that Aristotle, many, many years before, he's one of those wasted years, I'm sure, wrote a series of short books about logic, about formal logic, and it's called the Organon. It's a system for, well, when we study formal logic today, it's what we study, Aristotle's Organon. Francis Bacon called his book the New Organon. The idea being, look at me, I'm gonna be better than Aristotle. That Aristotle guy, why would we listen to him? All you gotta do is get some experiments going and you'll find out everything. Mr. Bacon, I might have a problem with that. Let me ask you, is there anything that might be difficult to test by experiment in a lab?
Yeah, the existence of God.
Okay, God can't be tested in a lab. What else can't be tested in a lab? Your mind. I can't prove I have a mind. Maybe sometimes you wonder if I have a mind. I can't prove it. I can't weigh it and measure it. I'm watching this show with my husband, and it's kind of a lame show, but it involves this group of people who are testing claims of like demonic possession and stuff like that. And in one of them, somebody built a machine, and they were looking for somebody who was about to die, somebody who knew they were going to die, and they were a volunteer. And they were going to seal them in the machine and weigh them to the, minutest decimal of a gram, and then weigh them again right after they die so they could weigh the soul. All right. But what if it's not a material thing that has weight? Do your parents love you? Do you think your parents love you? Do you love your parents? Okay, there's only one right answer to that. Can you test that in a lab?
No.
We can't test love or joy or fear. We can test people's blood pressure and see if it goes up when they're afraid, But we can't really test. There's lots of things that make your blood pressure go up, right? Oh, he's afraid. How do you know? There's a whole world of experience that we just can't test. And Francis Bacon, whether he knew it or not, was telling people, we don't need to worry about any of that. Just what we can test. Yeah, Dominic.
That's kind of like the hypocrisy of modern science. They can't test it, it's not real, but then there are other things that they can't test that they say are real.
Yeah. And Francis Bacon would never have said this. He wouldn't have said, I can't test God, so there is no God. But you see, you let enough time pass, and people do start saying that, right? And that's where we live. That's where we are, guys. This is the world we have to navigate and live in, where if it isn't testable by the scientific method, it doesn't exist and it doesn't matter. And so we've left out all of this human experience that we can't do that too. This doesn't explain everything, but it's a big step in that direction. Yeah, Dominic.
I just wanted to point out the irony that they're kind of, like science today is kind of like how the religions were in the early, like medieval ages, if it wasn't proven by God or like connected to God, then it wasn't real, or it was something bad.
Yeah. It's opposite. I mean, we had a time when people did accept this as part of reality. Part of reality for the people who lived long before us was not visible. Poor Mr. Bacon, I am sorry to report. Well, first of all, he took his own method very seriously. I'll give him that. But he was coming home, he was traveling, and he was wondering if you could slow down the process of meat rotting by reducing the temperature, which of course you can, which is why we have freezers and refrigerators. So he decided, the stories will say he caught a fowl. I think something bigger than a sparrow, I always picture a, chicken or a turkey. Well, they're turkeys in Europe. And he stuffed it with snow to chill it.
Oh, I heard
Yeah, and then he caught a cold and got pneumonia and died.
from stuffing a frozen chicken. I heard that on Stupid Death.
This This is true. However, he died doing what you know what? I am experimentally going to test whether or not chilling raw will slow the rotting process. And of course, he just didn't live to find out, did he? So I guess we shouldn't laugh at the death of Francis Bacon, but I do a little bit. I'm just going to admit he's not here to be angry with me. So we moved from Francis Bacon, a little bit, a couple hundred years, and we start looking at the world in this way. And we get another guy named Immanuel Kant. Kant is a philosopher that's very deep, and we're not going to go into it a lot. But I just want to read to you a couple of things he said. Remember, this is maybe 150 years-ish, 100 years after Bacon, okay? Enlightenment is man's release from his self-incurred tutelage. Tutelage means having a teacher. Enlightenment is freeing ourselves from our teachers. Have courage to use your own reason. That is the motto of enlightenment. He says, I'll read one more. Statutes and formulas, those mechanical tools of the rational employment, or rather misemployment of his gifts, are the fetters of an everlasting tutelage. Rules and books, they make you a slave. Break the chains. Don't listen to Aristotle. Don't listen to the church. Don't listen. Dare to use your own reason. Figure it out for yourself. Oh my goodness, that's scary. Now, so we are mixed in this room, like Catholic and Protestant mixed. So what I'm about to say is only meant to be a history lesson. But the Reformation took place at the time when the Enlightenment was springing up, and it fed on that. The Reformation message was, read it for yourself and figure it out for yourself. Don't listen to what authorities have to say. And of course, the problem was different people read it for themselves and they came to different conclusions. So guys like Martin Luther hate on guys like Ulrich Zwingli, because they don't agree. But but use your own reason, figure it out. Don't worry about what tradition might tell you. Figure it out for yourself. So we're the great-great-grandchildren of these ideas, right? Of being individuals and thinking for ourselves and testing it with science. And it hasn't borne very good fruit. And it's fruit that I think these guys didn't know it was going to bear, right?
Very many philosophers as well.
Yeah.
There's been a few.
Yeah. So we're going to revisit this when we get to Descartes, because he's the other enormous block in this building of what happened to us. But not everybody jumped on the bandwagon. In the 1600s, there were people who were highly devout, godly people who thought this was just ridiculous and who recognized, look, you can't test God with your senses. I mean, we can see his effects, but we can't bring God into the lab and expect him to perform, for our test tubes and so that we can measure him. It doesn't work that way. This is during the same time that a group of people in England arose that we refer to as the Puritans. Right? Yeah, what do you think of when I say Puritan?
I think of like them landing in Plymouth Rock.
Okay, so like pilgrims. What do you have any other images of pilgrims or of Puritans? What? Separatists. Some of them were they were ultra Puritans, right? The church is so bad, I'm not even going. Oliver Cromwell. Great. I'm going to talk about him in a minute. We have an idea of them being a little dry, a little not fun, which is a little fair, not totally fair. In England, and this, by the way, I'm telling you this just because it introduces the book we're going to read, our first book. In England, they stopped being Catholic, and they started their own church. And we call it the Anglican Church today. And they went through several rulers, and some were Catholic and some were not. But eventually they settled it down, and they said, this is the church we're going to have in England, the Anglican church, this is the way it is. But very, very early, there were people who didn't think that church cleaned up the church enough. But they wanted more reform. The Anglican church still had things that most people considered very Catholic. They had images and candles and vestments and things like that. And there were a group of people that said, aren't you guys paying attention to the guys, in mainland Europe and Calvin and all these guys who are just ripping everything out of the churches and whitewashed walls and all very plain? And the Anglicans said, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. And so a party of people who wanted to purify the church rose up, and they're Puritans, right? That's why we call them that. And then Dominic mentioned the separatists, the people who said, yeah, this church is so bad you can't even purify it. We're just going to start our own church. We're separating. And those were actually, a lot of the pilgrims were separatists. You went to jail, if you didn't go to the Anglican church. We have a lot of trouble. I'm like you guys. I've always lived here. It's like nobody, you go to church or you don't go to church. No, people might criticize you, but you know what I mean? The government can't come after you. They can't come after you because you go to this church and not that church. But that's the way it was like. You will go to this church. You will go to prison for a while. And some of the pilgrims, had been in prison briefly. There was a man named John Bunyan. And he is the author of our first book. And I wrote down some notes about John Bunyan. John Bunyan he hadn't really had a great education or anything. He was a tinker. Do you know what a tinker is? What's a tinker, Dominic? Yeah. It's a cobbler. Yeah. Tinkers, it makes me laugh. It sounds funny, doesn't it? They mend metal pots and pans. You go around with this pack and all your tools. I have no idea how you mend pots and pans, by the way. I feel like some welding is involved. I don't know. But he brings all his tools, and then you go to a town, and you say, hey, all you women of the village, do you have worn out pots and pans? I can mend them. Because back in the day, I don't know about you guys, but if I get a hole in a pot, I'm throwing the pot out and buying a new one. But people didn't really do that in the past. You fixed it and fixed it and fixed it so you could keep it. So John Bunyan traveled around, and he one day went to a church service, and he really just didn't think much about God in general. And he went to a church service, and the pastor said some things, and it really moved him. And he just kept thinking about it, and he joined the Puritans. And he started going around preaching. He took on several churches, and sometimes in history, in early American history was like this. Every church didn't have their own pastor, so some pastors traveled around. There were circuit riders, they called them, and they would go around and they would go to the various churches. John Bunyan did this, and they put him in jail for 12 years. The British authorities. And they said, if you will stop preaching, we will let you out. And just like the apostles, he said, well, yeah, if you let me out, I'm going to preach again. That's the way it's going to be. So I might as well stay here. Really sad life. He had this blind daughter who would come to the prison and bring him food. Oh, it was awful. It's a ghastly story. They let him out. The king at the time let him out, and then decided to revoke the amnesty and stuck him back in jail the next year. And he did another stint. And it was while he was in jail that he wrote the book we are going to read. Pilgrim's Progress. The full title is The Pilgrim's Progress from This World to That Which Is to Come. But we just call it Pilgrim's Progress. It was a favorite, apparently, of Ben Franklin. Because he says in his autobiography, Honest John, meaning John Bunyan, was the first that I knew of who mixes narration and dialogue, a method of writing very engaging to the reader, who is who in the most interesting parts finds himself, as it were, admitted into the company and present at the conversation. Ben Franklin liked Bunyan's writing. Pilgrim's Progress sold 100,000 copies before John Bunyan even died. It has been translated into 108 languages. It is the top-selling book of all time after the Bible. Bestseller of all time. Because those pilgrims loved their Pilgrim's Progress, right? And so probably when you get on the Mayflower, you're bringing a Bible and you're bringing Pilgrim's Progress. And so for us as Americans, it's really an amazing book because it's formative of who we started as a country. But it also shows that there were people, while we have Francis Bacon's running around, there are John Bunyans who say, no, 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 no. They push back, right? There is a God. And that's what we should be concerned about. Okay? So Pilgrim's Progress is an allegory. By the way, Pilgrim's Progress has two parts. Part one is called Christian's story. Part two is called Christiana's story. We are only going to read Christian's story. So, you kind of look at my book like, oh dear, that's a long book, Mrs. Ferguson. No, but we're only reading half of it. And it's like this, it's a conversation. So it's not even full pages of writing. Now, I asked for people to get, not abridged, and I asked for people to get, not updated language. But I'm telling you, it's not hard to follow. It's not Shakespeare. John Bunyan was just some guy. He was some tinker who had very little education. It's amazing he could write anything, Like some of us have been to school a lot more than John Bunyan already, and I don't think we could write this. But it's an allegory. Now, what is an allegory? What does that even mean if I say a book is an allegory?
I actually don't know.
That's very honest. Apparently no one else does either, Gabriel, so you're in good company. An allegory. An allegory is like a fable. It's a little like a parable in which the characters stand for something and they're often called the thing they stand for. So remember I told you, Jesus told about a sower, when a farmer went out to sow his seed, blah, blah, blah. And what if Jesus had said this? One day a farmer named God went out to sow some seed, which was the gospel. And some of it fell on a path called hard heart. And birds called life cares came and ate up the seed. Okay, you get where I'm going with this. In an allegory written like that, we don't have to think very hard because it flat out tells you what it is because it's what its name is. So for example, I told you we're reading part one, Christian's story. You want to take a stab at who Christian represents? Christians. There you go. And he's going to meet a guy named Evangelist. Get it? And he's going to leave a city called the City of Destruction. And he's going to go on a trip to the Celestial City. Okay. You really don't have to work super hard to figure out what he's talking about. He's going to meet a guy named Moneylove. And talkative. And, okay, that's an allegory. Yes? Yeah. And it's not hard to follow, is it? It's basically, what is the Christian life like? What does the Christian life look like? In the allegory, he's going on a trip. But in reality, we're all sort of going on a trip, right? We are, pilgrims here. We are wanderers. We're not of this world as Christians, right? And we're on our pilgrimage. as we live our life. We're not physically, most of us, going on a trip where we're hiking, you know? But we kind of are. We're all on a trip. And some of us are farther along the trip, and some of you are, you know, coming behind, but we're all on the same path. So this is what we're going to read. And so, you know, I picked this first, honestly, because it is one of the most famous formative books in the entire Christian world. So my Catholic students should know, he's very, very Protestant. So we're gonna meet a character named Pope, and he's not a fan. Christian is not a fan of it. But we need to see the bigger picture here, you know, what he's saying. And so, you know, we overlook some things, depending on our, you know, point of view, what Christian tradition we're in. But anyway, so I would like you to read the first half of Christian's story. Now, here's our little problem. It doesn't have chapters. So, how are you going to know when to stop? Okay, 2 ways. First of all, and I think all of you, except Noah maybe, know that in the reading guide there are questions for you to answer. I'm sorry, I'm going to do that. You know, I will endeavor not to do that anymore after today. To just keep, except for you. No, there are questions. All right, I want you to answer the questions and bring these. And it says to read until they part with talkative. Here's how you can find that. First of all, keep reading until they meet a guy named Talkative. And then after Talkative leaves, you can stop reading. But since you might want to know how many pages that is, because you might want to divide up your reading, basically, whatever your book is, look at the Part 1 Christian story and find out how many pages it has. Divide that in half. And then somewhere about halfway, you'll find Talkative. And that's how many pages you're reading, right? Because it's basically half the book. It is a pretty easy read. It's a pretty quick read. And it's been popular with people, like I said, for 400 years, people with not particular educational level, you know, it's not very hard to follow. Yes, Tom? What? Yours has stages? I don't know. Well, look at whatever stage is halfway through. But only Christians, all right? If your copy has Part 2, Christiana's story, if you love Pilgrim's Progress after we read it, and you're just like, I need more of that, read Christiana's story. But they kind of follow the same path. It's just, there's a group of them. Christiana has friends, and her sons come with her, and it's got a little different vibe. But I don't think it's as good. I think it's a little boring. So we're just reading Part 1. So that is your assignment. Okay, one more assignment. I almost forgot it. And I meant to do this when we did the poem. I told you that next week I would tell you what makes a sonnet a sonnet. But this week, I will tell you, we got 5 minutes, that's plenty of time. I will tell you one element that is always present in a sonnet. I think Mark said meter. Are you the one who said poems often have meter? Sonnets always have a particular kind of meter. And it is called iambic pentameter. Okay, so what does penta mean? Like, how many sides does a pentagon have?
5.
No problems here. It means 5. Whatever this is, it means 5 of them. Great. What does this mean? It means da-da. Da-da. For example, my name is Michelle. It has 2 syllables. I don't say Michel. I don't put the stress on the meh part. I put the oomph on the shell part. Michelle. Right? And in poetry, we mark it like this. Michelle. This means it's the oomph. And this means it's not. So, let's do a hard one. How many syllables in Alexander?
4.
4. Which one has the oomph?
Ander.
Ander. Alexander. Does everybody hear it?
Yeah.
Charlotte. How many syllables?
Is that only two?
It's only two. Which syllable has the oomph?
Char.
Char. Charlotte. Charlotte is opposite me. I am iambic. That's an iambic. You're trochaic. Sorry to say. I'm not going to do everybody, but my first question is here. Does everybody know how to count syllables? Do we all? Because there's no shame. Sometimes I find students that are older, it's like I never really understood what you mean by syllable. Okay. Do you all hear that in pretty much every word, except when it's like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, it probably has more than one, oomph. Most words of 2 or 3 or 4 syllables have one syllable that's right, and others that aren't. Iambic pentameter, here's an iamb, da-da, and you do it 5 times. Da-da, 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 da-da. That's it. And the reason in English they do so much iambic pentameter is because English is just chock full of iambics. I did this with the junior high kids. I don't remember. Did I do this with you guys last year? Did we talk about this? Okay. So, I made up one on the fly. I'm not making it now. I went to Davenport to buy a car. Iambic pentameter. Boom. The trucks are driving past the church all day. Great. I did this. My glasses help me see the words in books. It's really easy. Da-da, 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 da-da. That's it. Here's your job. I want 8 lines of iambic pentameter. And bonus if you can make them rhyme in some way. But if you can't, it's okay. And you can make them rhyme like 2 lines. Don't make all 8 lines rhyme. Oh my goodness, don't try that. That would be a nightmare. Find 8 words that all rhyme. Da-da, 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 da-da. The clock is telling me we have to leave. See, the camera has a tripod for its height. I mean, that doesn't make very much sense. Okay, I didn't say I was good at it. The tables. We need to move the tables after class, which is actually true. Da-da, 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 da. 8 lines. Okay, here's the new rules for writing assignments this year. Every paper is going to get marked C for complete or IC for not incomplete. IC for not complete. If you do what I asked you for, it's complete. The end. I'm not holding you responsible for anything I didn't say. So, do I expect you to have perfect poetry? No. Here's the one thing that makes it complete. How many syllables are there here? What is 5 times 2? 10. Guys, every line has to have exactly 10 syllables. If it doesn't have exactly 10 syllables, you didn't try.
And then 8 of those lines?
8 of those. So 10 times 8 is 40 syllables. 10 times 8 is 80 syllables. What? No, they do not have to be related to each other. What a wonderful question. They can be random, like I was doing random stuff, or you can do like, if you want to be fancy and rhyme them, they can be like 2 that go together and then another 2 that go together and another 2 that go together. No. If you guys can conjure up da-da, 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 da-da 8 times, I am happy. That's it. And I write a beautiful C on your paper and I give it back and it's over, right? But if you give me lines with 11 syllables or 14 syllables or 7 syllables, like you didn't even try to do it. Does that make sense? And I know you all can all count to 10. Pretty sure. All right. Is there any question about that? Da-da, 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 da-da. The air conditioner is working hard. See? It's really easy. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, I've done enough. Okay, I'm going to shut this off, but